Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for March 31st, 2022, recorded on 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot to talk about today, including the upcoming expectations for the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season and the potential for some severe weather today, and a look at previous severe weather events, including yesterday's severe weather outbreak across the South. So jumping straight into everything, taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this afternoon. Everything is nice and quiet in the tropical front, as you would expect for late March. Tomorrow begins April, and that means we are only a few days away from the Colorado State first guess at the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season forecast. And as we progress over the next subsequent weeks, we will be talking more and more about what to expect for the upcoming hurricane season. But for right now, all is pretty quiet. We actually have a lot of Saharan air that is out here across the deep tropics, as you would expect. A lot of dry, stable conditions, and that is expected for this time of the year. Big upper latitude systems sweeping down from the mainland United States and Canada all the way down in through the south here into even parts near close to the islands. And we're also watching for the potential of severe weather today, really across from the Florida Peninsula all the way up in through portions of the northeastern United States. Really, this whole area has a shot at severe weather, and we'll take a look at that here as we progress through the next upcoming few minutes. So, sea surface temperature anomalies. This is updated as of yesterday, March 30th. And we're definitely starting to see the change in terms of what we would expect for this upcoming hurricane season to one that is certainly looking a bit more active on the active side. So again, we've really been in a La Nina base state for the past almost year, really, and we've been transitioning into kind of a neutral phase. For a little bit, we transitioned from a kind of a La Nina to neutral, and kind of just flip flopping. Well, we're firmly back in a La Nina, and the Nina 3-4 index, which is this area right in through here in the equatorial Pacific. This is kind of the area where we measure whether we have neutral or El Nino or La Nina conditions. And we've been firmly entrenched in a La Nina, although we have started to see signs of warming, and especially out here in the Niño 1-2 region, which is closest to South America. We've continued to see gradual warming, and that's because this area through here, especially up towards the coast, as you get closer to the coast, there's not a lot of depth to that water. So this is kind of easily mixed. That's somewhat similar to the Gulf of Mexico. But that water is a little bit more easily mixed. And again, this Nino 1-2 region, it doesn't really have too much of an impact in terms of the hurricane season. However, I will say this. If we continue to see this warmth, and again, this is departures from normal, so this is about 1.5 degrees above the long-term average. However, if this were to persist into the hurricane season, or this would to amplify further, this could create a little bit of down shear, or really kind of create some shear over the Caribbean and portions of the West Atlantic. So we could have some problems in terms of the shear and overall dry subsidence in the atmosphere if this were to persist and maintain or amplify in any sort of way. But overall, this doesn't really have too much of an impact in the hurricane season for the Atlantic side. So we'll see what kind of happens there. Again, the overall base state is still very well entrenched within La Nina, and the conditions support another round of La Nina as we progress through the peak of the upcoming hurricane season. We'll take a look at the predictions here in just a moment. Elsewhere across the Atlantic basin, we continue to notice that, again, most of the main development region is really right at or just slightly below the long-term average. Again, especially closer to the coast of Africa here and the Cabo Verde Islands, where water temperatures right now are just about 0.5 degree to, in some cases, a degree Celsius below the long-term average. But we deal with this every single year, it really seems, since 2016, where we end up kind of cooler, and this is kind of to be expected. Again, keep in mind that this is to be expected with those trade winds that are kind of screaming through this area right now, and that's going to easily mix up the water. It doesn't mean that these water temperatures are freezing cold, it just means that they're below the long term average so far. Again, it's only March 31st, and this will certainly warm up as we progress through the remainder of April and in through the beginning then of May and June. And elsewhere, really, we will have to watch this warmth in the subtropical Atlantic. This is definitely something of note here, that this warmth in the subtropical Atlantic has kind of been one of the prominent keys over the last couple of years that we've seen, really going back all the way to 2016, 2017, 18, 19. The last several years, in fact, we've seen kind of this progressive pattern towards a warmer subtropical Atlantic. And this does really two things. If this becomes the primary area where the warmth is concentrated, we have a lot of subsidence issues in the main development region where there's dry sinking air. It's mainly suppressed out here. Now, again, I want to reiterate that, again, if this were to happen this year, and it's just too early to tell that, but if this were to happen this year, this is not the end all be all, because as we've seen even last year, these tropical waves, they develop, they come off of Africa, they don't develop over here, but guess where they do develop? They develop over here, and they develop where people are affected. And it's not just shipping interest this time, it's actual people and continents, etc. So we have to kind of keep this in mind that we'll see what happens, but just because if things don't develop in the main development region, it's not really the end all be all. And we've even seen years like that in 2005. Katrina never formed in the MDR. So we'll just kind of leave it at that for now. But this warmth also helps to create a higher subtropical ridge. And again, this is one of the things that is very crucial in steering storms closer to land, because it prevents a lot of trophiness over here. It prevents a lot of trophiness, so it just sends these waves further west because they are forced around this anticyclone, because the ridge is an anticyclonic rotation in the atmosphere, and it just forces these storms further west. So, we'll see how this progresses. It's still very early in the game, but these are now things that are, ticking, and the clock is, ticking really. So these are things that start to become all that more important as we progress through the remainder of the off season here. In terms of the Gulf of Mexico sea surface temperatures, it is quite toasty out there, especially in the southern Gulf. Water temperatures right near 26, 27 Celsius. So again, this will theoretically matter as we begin to approach the upcoming hurricane season here. Again, early season activity, if we get any in the Gulf of Mexico, this is certainly something that we'll have to pay attention to, is where these warm eddies kind of show up. Again, we kind of have this little tongue of 26 and 27 Celsius waters that are nosing its way into the central Gulf of Mexico. And again, this is pretty much all water temperatures that are at least, semi conducive right now, really, except for, 24, 25C. But these water temperatures, they're not cold. And again, they are actually running a little bit above the long term average. You can actually see that there's that warm eddy that is in here. And this really matters because, again, hurricanes and tropical cyclones, they love that extra, water content. So, we'll see how this kind of evolves. And definitely this will be supportive for severe weather because, again, there is higher moisture content that is sitting down here. And if this, manages to drift a little bit closer to the coast here, we could see, stronger moisture being advected. When we have low pressure systems or whatnot, we could have stronger moisture advection. So that is definitely something to watch, even for severe weather potential. But for right now, everything seems to kind of be behaving itself. But we'll have to watch this as it definitely comes closer to the peak of the upcoming hurricane season and certainly for any early season activity. So this is the early March 2022 CPC outlook, the Climate Prediction Center. And this is the probabilistic for the ENSO forecast, the El Nino Southern Oscillation Index. And again, really what this is showing here is that, again, this is kind of the February, March, and April time frame. This is March, April, May. So we're kind of right in through this region here. Again, we're kind of firmly entrenched in a La Nina pattern right now. And you can see the chances for La Nina do decrease as we go through the peak or towards the peak of the hurricane season. But notice that we have about a 45% chance or just slightly less than 50-50 shot of seeing a La Nina, and I'd say probably about 47% chance of neutral conditions by that time. And El Nino is no more than about a 10% chance at this point. And I truthfully do not really see there being any shot now for an El Nino. I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I've just seen the signs that I just don't think this is going to happen. And in fact, most of the climate models right now, by August, September, and October, which is kind of the peak of the hurricane season, do not really indicate anything of significance here in terms of where we're going to be in terms of El Nino, La Nina. And it really seems like this zero threshold right here, kind of most of the models are within this kind of zero threshold or just slightly above or below. And again, I mean, neutral conditions versus warm neutral conditions or cool neutral, it does have an effect on the hurricane season, but by and large, I wouldn't really suspect to see an El Nino. And in fact, even I mean, the odds by October, November, and December only increased to 50%, or I'm sorry, to 15% rather. So I really would not suspect to be seeing an El Nino return anytime soon. Of course, we're still in that spring predictability barrier, but I mean, as time goes on, we're really starting to kind of get the grasp and get the hint that I don't think we're going to be seeing El Nino for this time of the year. So that's pretty much to say about that. And the sea surface temperatures, this is coming off the climate forecast system, the CFS, and this is the sea surface temperature anomaly for the next few months. Again, this is not necessarily an accurate representation of what is to be expected, but this is one model, and a given forecast model is going to have different variations from run to run. So keep that in mind. It's kind of like forecasting severe weather in a sense, because there will be model variations. However, the general consensus is that as we approach August here, this is now valid for August, and there's a lot of subtropical warmth and not a lot of warmth down here in the main development region. And again, while this would create a larger ridge of high pressure here, this would also create stability issues because, again, we have a lot more upward moving air where all of this warmth is, and where all of that upward moving air, there has to be downward moving air somewhere. And in fact, it is kind of downstream of that. It's right over here, down in the main development region, that dry sinking air. So there is the potential that we could be dealing with that. And the monthly, the 3 month average here for really August, September, and October, this is the peak of the 2022 hurricane season. And we can really see that, again, we have, it's definitely not as dry as we've seen in some other runs. The main development region are roughly kind of average to maybe slightly above average in spots. With that higher concentration of subtropical enhanced rainfall. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean that this will be tropical storms in this region or whatever, but this just means that enhanced convection will be here. And we can check out real quickly how the CAN-SIPS forecast shows it. This is the, we'll go to kind of the 3 month precip anomalies here. And again, this generally shows more of an active, kind of a more so an active stretch of the Atlantic basin through there. And for what it's worth, we can just check those sea surface temperature anomalies. And again, kind of the same focus here, maybe a little bit more warmth down here in the deep tropics, but still subtropical warmth up here. And that could be problematic because, again, we could be dealing with either a stronger ridge of high pressure out here or that subsidence down here in the MDR. So certainly something to kind of keep in mind as we go forward with that. All right, so that's going to be closing out the hurricane outlook and discussion part, or the off-season edition part of that. We'll be moving now into the severe weather part of it. So today, right now, we have ongoing convection and the potential for severe weather all the way from Florida up through the northeast United States. Right now, we'll start off here in the southern United States. Well, we can tell that after the big severe weather event yesterday in portions of the deep south, including portions of Alabama, we have now dried and mostly cleared out. However, we notice that there's some clouds here. These are cumulus clouds, and these are developing because of unstable conditions aloft. We have cooler air at the surface and warmer temperatures aloft. And for a representation of that, we can check the BMX sounding here, taking from SharpEye. And if this decides to load, here we go, we can see that indeed we have these cooler temperatures at the surface, around 58 degrees Celsius at the surface over a 56 degree Fahrenheit dew point. And we notice that there's a sharp temperature inversion aloft. And if we were to take this down to the surface using the dry adiabat, we would be over 30 Celsius. And so this means that there is conditionally unstable air aloft because of this temperature inversion. And we are getting those cumulus clouds that we are seeing here on the satellite over here in the Birmingham area and portions of Georgia. Then across portions of Florida, we notice that there is some cumulonimbus clouds over here, kind of associated with an area of convection, and overspreading high cirrus clouds over here. And what this is going to represent is that we have ongoing convection, and the anvil plumes are stretching downstream of that. We can see kind of cloud streets developing here over portions of Florida and the peninsula. This indicates that we have an unstable air mass. And once again, if we were to kind of take a sounding, this is the 12Z sounding from Tampa Bay, we noticed that again we had a 69 degree temperature. Now, if we were to kind of modify the surface here to just account for what we've seen in recent hours, we have kind of an 82 over, we'll keep the 67 and we'll kind of mix this. And to account for that, this does now have a better shot at seeing severe weather down here. And for that reason, there is a risk for severe storms. Again, we can see using this modified sounding here from taking the current surface observations around the area, we notice that again we have some instability to work with. Again, kind of following this up the moisture axis here and just drawing where our LCL contour is. And then kind of following this up, we have a little bit of instability that is especially in the upper levels. We notice that we have some, not a lot, but there's some instability, and that might be just enough to kind of squeeze out the potential for a little bit of severe storms later in the day today across portions of Florida. And for that reason, there is a marginal risk really across this area for the remainder of today. Then as we progress further, and if we take a look across portions of the northeast United States, we notice that again, we have these thunderstorms going up right here, and this indicates that we do have the potential for some severe storms. Again, these are storms firing really with that enhanced lift ongoing from a low pressure baroclinic system. This is now moving kind of off in this direction, and the leading edge of the baroclinic forcing is right over this area. We can kind of see all this high cloud ongoing right now, and so the leading edge of this upper level lift is now beginning to increase, and we're getting convection that is developing in that region. There is an enhanced risk for severe storms today, really from eastern Pennsylvania through almost to near New Jersey and Washington, D.C., slight risk to the northern Florida peninsula, and a marginal risk all the way down to Melbourne. The Florida Tech campus obviously is included in that, and the Tampa Bay vicinity and Palm Bay. Yesterday's severe weather event was quite impressive. We had a moderate risk for severe storms yesterday across most of the deep south here, and we had a clustering of significant wind and tornado reports. Most of the tornado reports occurred actually in Alabama. We did have a handful of tornado reports in Mississippi, and sadly a few tornado reports this morning resulting in loss of life in northern Florida. This is a great reminder that this was a nocturnal event for the most part, especially in Alabama and Florida. And this is a great reminder to have a NOAA weather radio or some other reliable means of getting weather warnings to wake you up in the middle of the night if there were to be a tornado that happened to be coming down your street. This is a very great reminder of that. And we are kind of really now approaching the peak of the severe weather season, especially for the southern U.S. This is kind of the time where we're starting to get to the peak of the tornado season for the south U.S. And soon enough, we will have tornado season ramping up significantly across the Midwest United States. So, of course, we'll be kind of keeping tabs on that. Maybe got a chase plane or two kind of in there, but we'll see how those evolve over the next few months. Now, looking at the latest GFS forecast, this is looking at the 925 millibar layer in the atmosphere. So this is just above the surface. And this is kind of good. We're looking here at the dew point, and what this really shows is that we're really looking at dew point just a little bit above the surface, and this is good because this kind of mixes out a little bit of that shallower moisture. And again, shallow moisture is not really good for convection, especially severe weather. So looking a little bit higher up, if we get these higher numbers of dew points, like the 17C dew points resulting in near 60 Fahrenheit dew points here, that definitely is a good indicator, great indicator actually, of substantial moisture for severe weather. So we notice that again, we pretty much dry out over the next several days. We will have kind of this axis of high pressure kind of digging in, kind of got this little bit of northwest flow aloft here in the northeast U.S. And so we really kind of dry out. We notice that there is some ridging going on here as well. And then we can kind of see that we get this moisture return to kind of on go with this kind of subtropical high out here. We get moisture return that starts to really pump in southerly flow out here across the Texas and Oklahoma region. So we start to get that moisture return. We do have another front that is coming in, and we can even see maybe the potential for a little bit of a dry line and maybe a little bit of a frontal boundary like that, warm front. So we could see the return of severe weather. This is on Tuesday, so we could maybe get some return of severe weather ongoing across portions of Texas. We can actually drop a sounding in here, and in fact, the GFS does support a little bit there of the potential of severe weather, so that is certainly something to kind of keep in mind. This will then move off towards the east and maybe set up shop for another severe weather event across the South United States over the next several days. And this will have to be watched again. We're kind of in that pattern where one right after the other. And so no rest for the weary right now. And that moisture then eventually will get taken down by this big ridge of high pressure out here. We have ridging ongoing. And again, kind of this northerly flow here, bringing down a lot of this cooler polar air from the north. So we're really dry. And in fact, if we kind of take a sounding here across portions of Arkansas, we notice that temperatures are in the 40s. So we will be cool and dry. This is for Thursday of next week. And then eventually moisture return seems to set up and seems to be staying around for a while until the end of the forecast run here. This is way out in kind of voodoo land, but we might have a more substantial event here shaping up towards the end of the GFS forecast run. So hope that kind of just breaks down a little bit of what's going on over the next several weeks across the United States, and certainly for the hurricane outlook and discussion part of that. Hope you guys did enjoy and hope you found it useful. If you did, make sure to leave a like on the video and also subscribe and turn on bell notifications. Those really do help. All right. With that being said, hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys some more in the next upcoming weeks.